The 40 most compelling cases of 2024.
She texted that creep saying she hadn't gotten her period yet, and that was the last time anyone ever heard from her. Jarvis Ramon Butts, 41, had already spent almost 10 years in prison for what he did to 2 other girls. Now he's been charged with killing a 13-year-old girl after finding out she was pregnant with his child. In January 2024, 13-year-old Zia Harris was last seen getting off her school bus in Detroit, where Jarvis Ramon Butts picked her up. That was the last time she was ever seen. At the time, she was about 5 months pregnant. Police discovered that Jarvis had 5 kids with Zia's aunt, but here's the shocking part. He also has 12 or 13 kids with other women. This all happened after Jarvis had already done nearly a decade in prison for assaulting 2 other girls in similar cases. Even worse, Zia's aunt, who has children with Jarvis, knew about his past crimes, which makes you wonder, why on earth did they let him anywhere near Zia? Jarvis started texting Zia back in September 2022, and the messages were really disturbing. I'll share more about those in part 2 of this video. A year later, Zia was pregnant with Jarvis's baby. When he found out, he started searching online for abortion pills, ways to end a pregnancy, and even red antifreeze. Not long after, he told Zia he'd pick her up from school. That was the last time anyone saw her. She's been missing ever since, and her body still hasn't been found. 8-year-old Michael Millette was attacked and killed by 2 dogs. Michael and his mother were walking past Dillon's Berries Ridge when 2 wild dogs suddenly charged at them and knocked Michael to the ground. Facing the aggressive dogs, young Michael had no way to fight back. Despite his mother doing everything she could to help her son, kicking and hitting the dogs with all her strength, she couldn't get them off him. She screamed for help, hoping someone would come to their aid. Unfortunately, Michael became unresponsive and never moved again. The 2 dogs are now being held in isolation at the Volusia County Animal Control Center. Michael is gone, and his family is left waiting for answers. The animal control staff has been very compassionate and caring, doing their best to comfort the grieving family. As of now, the dog owners haven't given any direct response. May young Michael rest in peace, and I hope his family finds a way to heal from their sorrow. As for this tragic incident, what do you think? Should we blame the dog's instinctive behavior or the owners who are responsible for them? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 2 siblings die while grandma babysits. Check out this unbelievable story. Back in November 2022, Tracy took her 7-month-old grandson, Yuri, out for lunch. They came back home, and Tracy went inside the house by herself, completely forgetting that Yuri was still in the car. 4 hours later, Tracy remembered her husband, who was working on the other side of their property on a hot 90-degree day. So she decided to drive him a cold drink. As she was about to hand him the drink, it hit her. Yuri was still in the car, sitting there for hours. Tracy rushed to grab him out of the car seat and started CPR, then called 911, but it was too late. Little Yuri, only 7 months old, couldn't survive. Terrible accident, right? But what if I told you this wasn't the first time? What if it happens twice? Almost exactly a year before, Yuri's older brother Ezra died while under Grandma Tracy's watch. In November 2021, Tracy fell asleep while watching her 16-month-old grandson, Ezra. When she woke up, he had wandered off and drowned in a pond near the house. Ezra's death was ruled an accident, and Tracy wasn't charged. And the worst part? This was the first time Tracy was allowed to babysit Yuri since Ezra's death, and now Yuri is gone too. Tracy's been charged with aggravated manslaughter for Yuri's death, but the jury's treating it like just another accident, and they've decided to let her go. Do you still think this was just a tragic coincidence?
I hope you get exactly what you deserve in prison, and you know what's gonna happen to you when you go to prison.
He saved a drowning boy and got arrested and charged for it? This is ridiculous. Zachary Stein, 23, is a lifeguard. A 5-year-old boy, Adam Katak, nearly drowned in the splash pool at a park, but luckily Zachary saved him and prevented a tragedy. Instead of being thanked, though, Zachary was arrested by the police and charged with endangering Adam's life. According to the police, after reviewing the footage, there were fewer than 8 other kids in the pool, and Zachary was the only lifeguard on duty. They claim he didn't notice Adam was underwater for nearly 4 minutes. Even though he eventually saved Adam and performed CPR, reviving the child, the police believe Zachary should have noticed the boy sooner. Surveillance footage shows that Zachary wasn't distracted by his phone or anything else. So the question remains, why did it take him so long to notice Adam was drowning? Zachary, who had been working as a full-time lifeguard there for 5 years, has now resigned from his job over this incident. He saved a life and is being charged with reckless endangerment and risk of injury to a minor. Do you think this punishment is fair? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. This is the moment a man is released after being wrongfully imprisoned for 20 years. Daniel Villegas was just 16 years old when he was arrested on August 24, 1995, and accused of murdering 2 teenagers. The statement he gave to detectives led to a life sentence. In 2007, he appealed, claiming his statement was coerced, but the appeal was denied. But he didn't give up. Finally, in October 2018, Daniel's lawyers uncovered new evidence proving his innocence. The evidence pointed to 2 other suspects as the real killers. Additionally, it showed that his statement to detectives had indeed been forced. Over 20 years had passed and Daniel had spent his youth behind bars, but he was finally exonerated. When Daniel Villegas walked out of prison, the world around him felt both unfamiliar and familiar. He had missed out on love, family, time with friends, and all the things people normally experience in life. After his exoneration, Daniel received $20,000 in compensation. Do you think he should have gotten more? Drop your thoughts in the comments.
Not guilty of...
This is the moment a man is released after being wrongfully imprisoned for 20 years. Daniel Villegas was just 16 years old when he was arrested on August 24, 1995, and accused of murdering 2 teenagers. The statement he gave to detectives led to a life sentence. In 2007, he appealed, claiming his statement was coerced, but the appeal was denied. But he didn't give up. Finally, in October 2018, Daniel's lawyers uncovered new evidence proving his innocence. The evidence pointed to 2 other suspects as the real killers. Additionally, it showed that his statement to detectives had indeed been forced. Over 20 years had passed and Daniel had spent his youth behind bars, but he was finally exonerated. When Daniel Villegas walked out of prison, the world around him felt both unfamiliar and familiar. He had missed out on love, family, time with friends, and all the things people normally experience in life. After his exoneration, Daniel received $20,000 in compensation. Do you think he should have gotten more? Drop your thoughts in the comments. A woman hosted a lunch and invited 4 guests. Why did 3 of them die from poisoning, and the 4th is currently in critical condition? The woman who hosted the lunch, Erin Patterson, claims she's innocent, but it's hard to believe her when only she and her children didn't get poisoned. The guests were her husband's parents, so I guess her in-laws, but she and her husband are separated. Dawn and Gail Patterson and her sister Heather Wilkinson, all 3 passed away, and Heather's husband Ian is now fighting for his life in the hospital, needing a liver transplant. Police are investigating because it's obvious 4 people were poisoned, and they think it's because Erin had used mushrooms in the lunch. But Erin and her children are perfectly fine. Erin gave an interview where she said she loves her family, but when asked about what the guests ate or where the mushrooms came from, she refused to answer. She just kept saying she's innocent. Could this have been an accidental poisoning? Maybe she picked the mushrooms herself in the wild without realizing they were toxic? But if that's the case, then why didn't she eat those mushrooms herself? She's now in jail, facing murder charges. Do you think she's innocent? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
Not guilty of...
This is the moment a man was released after spending 16 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. 52-year-old Aval Marshall was accused of murder in 2008, based on surveillance footage from someone's grandma's house. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Throughout the trial, Marshall maintained his innocence, but he was found guilty without ever even being shown the granny footage. Marshall repeatedly requested a review of his case, but every time he was denied. Still, he never gave up. For 16 years, he kept fighting. He said, "They know what proved my innocence, but they hoped I'd just shut up. I said, no, I'm going to fight." Finally, 16 years later, Marshall got the proof he had been waiting for. A new video emerged that showed the real killer might have been one of 2 teenagers who weren't even in the surveillance footage at the time of the incident. But why did it take so long for this key evidence to surface? Was someone trying to cover up the truth? Marshall was finally released, but he lost 16 years of his life, his freedom, and so many of life's precious moments. What kind of compensation do you think the government should give Marshall?
Not guilty of...
A heartbroken mother was sentenced to prison for setting her daughter's rapist on fire after he was released from prison. Maria's daughter, Veronica, was sexually assaulted by their neighbor, Antonio Cosme, in 1998, when Veronica was just 13 years old. Antonio was punished with a 9-year prison sentence, but he showed no remorse. During a parole period in June 2005, he approached Maria at a bus station and taunted her, asking, How is your daughter now? Faced with Antonio's lack of regret, Maria felt a mix of anger and fear. To punish this evil man, she went to a nearby gas station, bought a gallon of fuel, found Antonio at a bar, poured gasoline over him, and set him on fire. As he burned, Antonio cried for help, and by the time he was taken to the hospital, he was diagnosed with 90% of his body burned. He died a few days later. While Maria avenged her daughter, she was also sentenced to 9.5 years for murder, which was later reduced to 5.5 years after an appeal. This mother evokes both sympathy and admiration, and many have made significant efforts to keep her out of prison. What are your thoughts on this situation? Please leave your comments below. Fernando Salgado screamed and cried, "Let me out! Let me out! I just want to go home so bad." This was the moment an 18-year-old student stood trial for sexual assault charges, and when he heard the decision, he completely broke down. He was accused of using a steel bar to assault two 14-year-old boys, but he pleaded not guilty. According to the investigation, he wasn't the only one involved. His teacher, Emmanuel de la Rosa, was also brought to court for allegedly assaulting two students, along with 3 other male students who were arrested and charged as well. When Fernando found out his bail was set at $300,000, he lost it in court, begging to go home. Meanwhile, his family is doing everything they can to raise the huge bail amount. They believe Fernando is a kind person and couldn't have hurt anyone, and they're asking for support. In the end, 18-year-old Fernando was sentenced to 3 years of probation, while his 27-year-old teacher got 5 years in prison. Do you think this sentence was fair? Share your thoughts in the comments.
But luckily, Zachary saved.
Breaking news, a sports reporter covering the Super Bowl was found dead in his hotel room, and a woman has been arrested for using his credit card. The reporter was 27 years old and from Topeka, Kansas. He was in town to cover the Super Bowl for his radio station. On Wednesday, his colleagues couldn't get in touch with him, so they called his hotel to request a wellness check. That's when he was found dead in his hotel room. When authorities tried to contact the reporter's family, they discovered that his wife had passed away in a car accident last year. Now, with his passing, he leaves behind a 2-year-old daughter. Police launched an investigation into his death, and surveillance footage showed the reporter entering his hotel room with a woman. Shortly after, the woman was seen leaving the room alone. The same woman was later caught using the reporter's credit card at several stores in New Orleans. She was arrested and is now under investigation. Shockingly, it turns out this woman has a history of drugging men and stealing their credit cards. She's now facing multiple charges. At this time, authorities haven't released any further details about the case. I'll keep you updated as new information comes in.
I hope you die in prison as well.
An 18-year-old mother cruelly discarded her 15-month-old daughter into a trash bin, leading to the child's death inside it. This tragic incident came to light 3 months later when police discovered the 15-month-old Evelyn. The mother, Megan, was arrested and charged with 2 counts of felony murder, facing a possible death sentence. According to court records, a law enforcement officer testified in court, detailing the disturbing circumstances surrounding Evelyn's discovery in the trash bin. It was in a cluttered storage shed where they found Evelyn wrapped in a black garbage bag and covered with a grayish-white blanket. The autopsy report indicated that Evelyn had marks on her face from being bound too tightly, and mechanical obstruction was found in her airway, confirming she died from asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. They established that Evelyn was alive when she was thrown into the trash bin. Megan tearfully claimed it was an accident, stating that she had been sleeping with her boyfriend and Evelyn, and upon waking the next day, she found Evelyn unresponsive. This led her to dispose of Evelyn in the trash bin. However, the medical examiner's testimony indicated to the judge that Evelyn's age made it impossible for her to have died in such a manner. 6 years have passed since this incident, and now 23-year-old Megan is on trial. What do you think her verdict will be?
A man was robbed and killed by 2 women, yet they only got 10 years in prison. The victim's father was devastated. In court, Erica Covington and Dariana Taylor agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder for the shooting of Brian Alton Mimano Solano. The incident happened in a Las Vegas hotel room. Surveillance footage showed Brian talking with the 2 women around 2:14 a.m. By 2:35 a.m., they were seen walking into the hotel room together, with Brian carrying a bag across his chest. It's believed the 2 women originally intended to rob Brian and take his bag, but it ended with him being shot and killed. Brian's body was discovered by a housekeeper, and it's estimated he had been dead for over 8 hours by then. Covington and Taylor took his belongings and left the scene without calling for help. While gathering evidence, detectives found two explicit videos on Brian's phone that included Covington and Taylor. This may have been part of their motive for killing him. The victim's father spoke out in court, saying, "It wasn't enough just taking his belongings. They had to kill him. I'm asking for justice for my son." In the end, Covington and Taylor were sentenced to 10 years in prison and will be eligible for parole in 2033. Do you think 10 years is too light of a sentence? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
A 12-year-old boy appeared in court for the murder of a 9-year-old boy, and the victim's parents not only forgave him but also expressed hope for his recovery. The incident occurred in 2014 when 12-year-old Lawhorn went to a nearby playground and randomly stabbed 9-year-old Michael. Instead of fleeing, Lawhorn called 911, informing the police that he had just injured someone and urged them to come quickly to arrest him, expressing a desire for the death penalty. In court, Lawhorn's defense attorney argued that he had been abused by his parents for years and was legally insane at the time of the murder. A physical examination of Lawhorn revealed multiple bruises on his body, leading to child abuse charges against his mother and stepfather. After learning about Lawhorn's background, Michael's parents forgave the 12-year-old boy and expressed anger towards the Michigan Child Protective Services, CPS, for their failure to act, which they believed contributed to the tragedy. Ultimately, Lawhorn was convicted and spent 6.5 years in prison, during which the victim's grandmother visited him and showed concern for his well-being. He was released in March 2021. After his release, Lawhorn was determined to take responsibility for his actions, aiming to prove to others that he was no longer the child who made mistakes and hoping to give back to society by helping others. What are your thoughts on this situation? Share your views in the comments section. A 12-year-old boy appeared in court for the murder of a 9-year-old boy, and the victim's parents not only forgave him but also expressed hope for his recovery. The incident occurred in 2014 when 12-year-old Lawhorn went to a nearby playground and randomly stabbed 9-year-old Michael. Instead of fleeing, Lawhorn called 911, informing the police that he had just injured someone and urged them to come quickly to arrest him, expressing a desire for the death penalty. In court, Lawhorn's defense attorney argued that he had been abused by his parents for years and was legally insane at the time of the murder. A physical examination of Lawhorn revealed multiple bruises on his body, leading to child abuse charges against his mother and stepfather. After learning about Lawhorn's background, Michael's parents forgave the 12-year-old boy and expressed anger towards the Michigan Child Protective Services, CPS, for their failure to act, which they believed contributed to the tragedy. Ultimately, Lawhorn was convicted and spent 6.5 years in prison, during which the victim's grandmother visited him and showed concern for his well-being. He was released in March 2021. After his release, Lawhorn was determined to take responsibility for his actions, aiming to prove to others that he was no longer the child who made mistakes and hoping to give back to society by helping others. What are your thoughts on this situation? Share your views in the comments section.
A 14-year-old boy was stabbed to death while trying to protect his girlfriend from being bullied by two 15-year-old boys, who are now being charged as adults. According to police investigations, the tragedy stemmed from a verbal altercation that occurred weeks earlier. The victim, Bobby, had referred to Plunkett and Harris as freaks during a previous conflict, which incited their anger. The two suspects then plotted revenge and began following Bobby's girlfriend when they saw her in a mall. After she realized they were following her, she called Bobby for help. They stole a knife from the mall and wore masks, claiming they intended to cause trouble. Video footage from witnesses shows Bobby arriving at the scene and attempting to de-escalate the situation. He backed away, raised his hands, and even pleaded with them to put down the knife. However, his pleas did not prevent the attack, and Harris tackled Bobby to the ground while Plunkett stabbed him. By the time emergency responders arrived, Bobby had succumbed to his injuries. The two suspects are currently facing charges of conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated assault, and theft, with Plunkett also charged with first-degree murder. What could have driven these two 15-year-olds down such an extreme path? Share your thoughts in the comments.
Please help me! Please help me!
A father shot and killed his 5-month-old twin daughters while they were in their mother's arms. This incident occurred in Jacksonville, Florida, when 22-year-old Megan Hyatt's ex-boyfriend broke into her home and opened fire. At the time, Megan was trying to protect her children by turning their faces away from the gun. She was shot in the eye and lost her vision. Tragically, her daughters, Hayden and Caden, were killed by their father, and Megan's father was also murdered before her eyes. Ultimately, the ex-boyfriend chose to take his own life. Megan suffered severe injuries but miraculously survived. In an interview, Megan shared that her ex-boyfriend had previously subjected her to verbal abuse and exhibited controlling behavior. After their separation, he aimed to destroy her life. Following the incident, she endured countless nightmares daily, and PTSD made it difficult for her to lead a normal life. It took a long time for her to recover and regain a semblance of normalcy. Now, Megan has a gray-blue prosthetic eye. Although she is still blind, she smiles and says, "It's perfect."
Not guilty of...
This is the longest-running wrongful conviction case in American history. Kevin Strickland, wrongfully imprisoned, has finally gained his freedom after 43 years. In 1979, Kevin Strickland was accused of participating in a triple homicide and was convicted by an all-white jury without any physical evidence, despite having an alibi. The key evidence against him was the testimony of a witness who later recanted and detailed the process of her recantation. Nonetheless, Kevin Strickland remained incarcerated for 43 years, until the Missouri Attorney General's office reviewed the case and confirmed his innocence. This marked the end of one of the longest wrongful conviction cases in U.S. history and a long-awaited moment of justice for Kevin Strickland. During his long wait in prison, Kevin Strickland lost the most precious years of his life, including the death of his mother, with whom he could not reunite before she passed away. Even after gaining his freedom, Missouri law denied him any compensation due to the lack of DNA evidence. Today, Kevin Strickland can only rely on non-profit organizations and crowdfunding platforms to rebuild his life. "I want to go to the beach and see the endless ocean, to feel the power of nature." This has been one of Strickland's long-held dreams. Now he can finally begin to pursue a life of freedom.
You go to prison for the rest of your life, that means you'll die there. That's what I'm telling you to do.
A 14-year-old boy was stabbed to death while trying to protect his girlfriend from being bullied by two 15-year-old boys, who are now being charged as adults. According to police investigations, the tragedy stemmed from a verbal altercation that occurred weeks earlier. The victim, Bobby, had referred to Plunkett and Harris as freaks during a previous conflict, which incited their anger. The two suspects then plotted revenge and began following Bobby's girlfriend when they saw her in a mall. After she realized they were following her, she called Bobby for help. They stole a knife from the mall and wore masks, claiming they intended to cause trouble. Video footage from witnesses shows Bobby arriving at the scene and attempting to de-escalate the situation. He backed away, raised his hands, and even pleaded with them to put down the knife. However, his pleas did not prevent the attack, and Harris tackled Bobby to the ground while Plunkett stabbed him. By the time emergency responders arrived, Bobby had succumbed to his injuries. The two suspects are currently facing charges of conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated assault, and theft, with Plunkett also charged with first-degree murder. What could have driven these two 15-year-olds down such an extreme path? Share your thoughts in the comments. Mother sentenced to 10 years in prison after 4 sons die in house fire. On the day of the incident, Rose went shopping, leaving her 4 children locked inside the house. When the fire broke out, the children instinctively ran upstairs in an attempt to escape the danger. They stood on the upper floor, calling for help from the window. Neighbors heard their cries and tried desperately to break down the door, but the front door was locked. Ultimately, firefighters arrived and, upon entering the house, discovered the children's bodies. They had hidden under the bed, trying to evade the smoke and flames. However, their lives were tragically claimed by the relentless fire. An investigation concluded that the fire was likely caused by an unattended cigarette or a tipped-over candle igniting flammable materials in the home. The smoke and carbon monoxide detectors did not function because the door was locked by Rose, leaving the young children with no choice but to run upstairs and call for help. After the trial, the judge determined that Rose's severe negligence resulted in the deaths of her 4 children, sentencing her to 10 years in prison. Do you think the verdict in this case is fair? Please share your thoughts in the comments. A mother placed her autistic son in jail, and after only 10 hours in custody, he died. She has since taken legal action against the personnel involved. 20-year-old Isaiah Johnson was diagnosed with autism. Video footage from the incident shows Isaiah exhibiting stereotypical behaviors, such as hitting his head during an emotional outburst. This is a common self-soothing mechanism among individuals with autism. However, his behavior was misinterpreted, and those present attempted to physically restrain him, which only heightened his panic. Medical experts emphasize that individuals with autism often cannot tolerate restraint or touch, and this excessive intervention resulted in severe brain injury for Isaiah. Despite his repeated pleas to speak with his mother to help calm him down, his request was ignored. Doctors later informed the family that an earlier intervention might have saved Isaiah's life. In court, the family pointed out that mental health experts had verbally humiliated Isaiah, calling him a crybaby. They alleged that the experts failed to listen to his cries for help and warnings, overlooking his needs. The family believes that had the intervention been more compassionate and professional, Isaiah's life might have been saved.
2 children died from hypothermia, and their 29-year-old mother cried out, "All I want is a place to sleep. Why can't anyone give me that?" Tatiana, a homeless mother in November 2023, was forced to live in a 2000 town and country minivan, struggling to survive. She sought help from the children's father, but he always made excuses, claiming he was busy with work and that the kids couldn't stay with him. He lived with a woman whose parents didn't want the children there. Tatiana had also reached out multiple times to the Detroit city government for assistance, but due to the high demand for shelter, they informed her that there were no family beds available. As a result, they had no choice but to continue living in the car, which became their temporary refuge. Despite the hardships, Tatiana stated that her children lacked nothing in other ways. They were fed every day and never went without. She accompanied them to school almost every day. On the morning of the tragedy, Tatiana tried to wake her son for school. When he didn't respond, she realized the situation was dire and immediately took him to the hospital. Medical personnel attempted emergency resuscitation, but unfortunately, the children were pronounced dead. According to the scene investigation, the temperature in Detroit that night was close to 10 C, and inside the unheated vehicle, it could have been even lower. Preliminary tests by the medical examiner indicated that both children exhibited typical symptoms of hypothermia. Whose fault is this tragedy? Please share your thoughts in the comments. The 88-year-old dungeon father, Joseph Fritzell, is set to apply for parole in an attempt to regain his freedom after serving 15 years of his sentence. In 1984, Fritzell imprisoned his 18-year-old biological daughter, Elizabeth Fritzell, in a sealed space in the basement of their home for 24 years. During that time, he repeatedly assaulted Elizabeth and forced her to give birth to 7 of his children. 1 infant died due to breathing difficulties, and Fritzell disposed of the body in an incinerator. Of the remaining 6 children, 3 were forced to live with Elizabeth in the dungeon, while the other 3 were raised by Fritzell and his wife, Rosemary Fritzell, who falsely claimed that these children were abandoned on their doorstep. The case came to light in 2008 when one of Elizabeth's daughters was hospitalized due to a serious illness. Under police protection, Elizabeth detailed her 24 years of captivity and the abuse she and her children suffered at the hands of Fritzell. In 2009, an Austrian court sentenced Fritzell to life imprisonment. After the case was exposed, Elizabeth was given a new identity and began a new life. Now, at 88 years old, Fritzell's legal team insists that he poses no further threat to society due to his Alzheimer's disease and frail health. They plan to submit a parole application this March. Reports indicate that Fritzell has also suggested returning to the location where he once imprisoned Elizabeth. What are your thoughts on this?
This is out of control! Don't fuck with me, Jeff!
A 33-year-old man was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the sexual assault and murder of a 9-month-old baby. Benjamin, 33, committed the heinous acts against him and his daughter, Emily, on the night of October 2, 2016. The following morning, Amanda woke up and went downstairs to look for her daughter, only to find Benjamin half-naked, with his pants unzipped, squatting next to Emily and claiming he was drying her off. Amanda discovered Emily covered in blood, cold to the touch, and barely breathing. She immediately called 911. Emily was rushed to the hospital but tragically passed away 2 days later after being taken off life support due to her severe injuries. Benjamin was arrested and claimed he was drunk, asserting that he couldn't remember the details of the assault and violence. However, police were able to expose his lies through evidence collected at the scene. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the jury unanimously found Benjamin guilty, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Do you think the sentence for Benjamin is fair? A 15-year-old boy shielded his mother from gunfire and revealed in a 911 call that his father was the shooter. 41-year-old Kisha, after divorcing, lived with her 19-year-old daughter Deveni and 15-year-old son Erlai. On the day of the incident, Kisha and Erlai were at home when Kisha heard a loud bang at the door. As she went to check, her ex-husband Earl Sr. forced his way in with a gun and shot Kisha. Injured, Kisha managed to struggle back to her bedroom, attempting to close the door to hide, but Earl Sr. relentlessly pursued her, continuing to fire. Hearing the commotion, 15-year-old Erlai rushed out of his room to save his mother. Earl Sr. fired several shots at his son, who fell to the ground but still managed to call 911 for help, pleading for the police to rescue his mother. After the attack, Earl Sr. fled the scene and admitted to killing his wife and son during a Facebook Live broadcast. When the police arrived, Kisha had been shot 5 times and was critically injured, while Erlai succumbed to his injuries from blood loss. The police immediately launched a statewide manhunt for Earl Sr. 3 days later, when they found him at a motel, he had already taken his own life. Kisha remains in intensive care, while the shooter avoided legal consequences through suicide. The question remains, who is responsible for this tragedy? A man has been sentenced to death for the murder of an 11-year-old girl and her babysitter. He reacted to the verdict by attacking his lawyer. The incident occurred in 1990 when the girl's mother, Jan Cornell, went to spend the night at her boyfriend's house, leaving 11-year-old Robin in the care of babysitter Lisa. When she returned the next day, she found her daughter's body in the upstairs bathroom, and Lisa was also brutally murdered in another room. Forensic examinations revealed that both Robin and Lisa had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and ultimately strangled. At the time, police were unable to identify a suspect due to a lack of strong evidence. It wasn't until 2016 that Joseph Zialar was arrested for an unrelated crime, and police discovered that his DNA matched the DNA found at the crime scene from 1990. Notably, the semen found on Robin's bed sheets was confirmed to be consistent with Zialar's DNA, with a matching probability exceeding 1 in 70 billion. In 2023, the case finally went to trial. Zialar maintained his innocence, but the compelling DNA evidence led the judge to find him guilty. He was sentenced to death. Zialar reacted to the sentence with anger, shouting and elbowing his lawyer in the face before being subdued and taken away by court officers. After 33 years, Robin and Lisa have finally received justice. What are your thoughts on this case? An 8-year-old girl was sexually assaulted by her own uncle, leading her father to kill and dismember him. One night, James discovered bloodstains on his daughter's underwear and patiently asked her what had happened. Although frightened, she eventually revealed that her uncle had assaulted her. Encouraged by her father's support, this revelation left James in shock, anger, and unbearable pain. He couldn't believe that his own brother could commit such a crime against his young niece. Consumed by rage, he rushed to his brother's house and beat him unconscious. However, his anger did not subside. James bound his brother and subjected him to prolonged and brutal torture before taking an axe and dismembering his body. James placed the head, arms, and legs into suitcases and then drove to a remote lake to dispose of them, attempting to cover up his actions. A few days later, 2 hikers discovered a suitcase floating in the lake and immediately called the police. Investigators found James's fingerprints on the victim's body and in the suitcase, and blood from the victim in James's cart trunk. He was arrested and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole due to the heinous nature of his actions. Do you think his actions were justified? In your mind, is he a hero or a criminal?
My kids for me and act like that? Fuck you and that fucking bitch!
A husband forced his wife to saw off her lover's head, resulting in a life sentence for him, while the wife faced no charges. 31-year-old Armando discovered flirtatious messages between his wife Brittany and her colleague Jonathan, leading him to suspect infidelity. In a fit of rage, he violently attacked her. After Brittany fainted, Armando used her phone to text Jonathan, inviting him to a secluded park. Jonathan arrived late at night as scheduled, and Armando, who had been lying in wait, shot him 3 times, killing him on the spot. Armando then drove 200 miles into the mountains with his wife in the body, ordering Brittany to use a saw to remove Jonathan's head to prevent identification. A few days later, wildlife enforcement officers stumbled upon Jonathan's body during a routine patrol. Police arrested the couple based on evidence from text messages and murder tools found in Armando's vehicle. Brittany provided detailed accounts of Armando's violent actions in the murder, including how she was coerced into helping cover up the crime under threats. The gunshot wounds and the condition of the body aligned with her testimony, further corroborating Armando's method. Ultimately, Armando was sentenced to life in prison, while Brittany, who acted under threat to her life and cooperated with the investigation, was not sentenced to prison. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe Brittany should have been sentenced?
I waited for this day
A female student at the University of South Carolina was stabbed 120 times after getting into the wrong car, and the attacker has been sentenced to life in prison. The incident occurred at 2 a.m. when 21-year-old Samantha and her friends used the Uber app to request a ride after a night out at a bar. She mistakenly entered the vehicle driven by 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland, thinking it was her Uber. When Samantha realized this was not her intended ride and tried to leave, Rowland activated the child's safety locks, preventing her from escaping. Concerned when Samantha did not return home as expected and could not be reached, her friends reported her missing to the police. Through surveillance footage, investigators conducted an inquiry, ultimately discovering Samantha's body in a remote wooded area 65 miles from Columbia. She had sustained 120 stab wounds. Police found Samantha's DNA under Rowland's fingernails, and her phone was located inside his vehicle. During the trial, Rowland consistently denied his guilt, but Samantha fought with all her strength, leaving enough evidence for the jury to uncover the truth. The judge subsequently sentenced Rowland to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A mentally ill teenager killed his father and, a year later, murdered his mother, but was found not guilty and released. The incident occurred during a heated argument between Colin and his mother, Catherine. Subsequently, Colin stabbed his mother in the neck with a knife. Court records indicate that the blade nearly penetrated through to the back of her neck, leading to Catherine's death from excessive blood loss. When the police arrived, Colin made no attempt to seek help or claim that his mother needed urgent medical assistance. Instead, he calmly opened the door for the officers and stated, "I know my rights, I need a lawyer." In court, Colin's defense attorney argued that Catherine had brandished a knife first during the altercation, attempting to attack Colin. At just 17 years old, Colin's brain was not fully developed, impairing his ability to make rational decisions in a dangerous situation. Therefore, his reaction in self-defense led to the tragic outcome. It was revealed that a year prior, Colin had been accused of shooting his father, but was not convicted due to a lack of evidence. Now, with the defense claiming self-defense against his mother's attack, the jury accepted this argument, resulting in Colin being acquitted. Do you consider 17-year-old Colin an innocent offender or a cold-blooded parricide?
Please help me! Please!
A mentally ill teenager killed his father and, a year later, murdered his mother, but was found not guilty and released. The incident occurred during a heated argument between Colin and his mother, Catherine. Subsequently, Colin stabbed his mother in the neck with a knife. Court records indicate that the blade nearly penetrated through to the back of her neck, leading to Catherine's death from excessive blood loss. When the police arrived, Colin made no attempt to seek help or claim that his mother needed urgent medical assistance. Instead, he calmly opened the door for the officers and stated, "I know my rights, I need a lawyer." In court, Colin's defense attorney argued that Catherine had brandished a knife first during the altercation, attempting to attack Colin. At just 17 years old, Colin's brain was not fully developed, impairing his ability to make rational decisions in a dangerous situation. Therefore, his reaction in self-defense led to the tragic outcome. It was revealed that a year prior, Colin had been accused of shooting his father, but was not convicted due to a lack of evidence. Now, with the defense claiming self-defense against his mother's attack, the jury accepted this argument, resulting in Colin being acquitted. Do you consider 17-year-old Colin an innocent offender or a cold-blooded parricide?
Now they have to grow up for the rest of their life without their dad, and he was a good-ass dad. I hope you get exactly what you deserve in prison, and you know what's gonna happen to you when you go to prison.
He killed and dismembered his 8-year-old daughter's older brother after the girl returned home from playing at his brother's house and her father. Rodriguez noticed red spots on her pants that looked like blood. When he asked his daughter if she had been hurt while playing, she told him that her uncle had forcibly inserted something into her body, causing her great pain. Furious upon hearing this, Rodriguez immediately went to his brother's residence and knocked him to the ground the moment the door opened, rendering him unconscious. Overwhelmed by rage upon thinking of his injured daughter, Rodriguez brutally cut off his brother's genitals and stuffed them into his mouth. Still filled with anger, he then grabbed an axe, dismembered his brother's body, placed it in a suitcase, and drove 40 kilometers to a remote lake where he threw the suitcase. A few days later, 2 hikers discovered the floating suitcase and promptly reported it to the police. Law enforcement confirmed the victim's identity through fingerprints collected from the body and subsequently found bloodstains in Rodriguez's cart trunk. Ultimately, Rodriguez was sentenced to life in prison. Do you think the father's actions were justified? How would you handle a situation like this?
I want to rip you limb from limb and discard you like trash.
Have you heard about the 16-year-old boy who blinded an 18-year-old girl and left her paralyzed? On the day of the incident, the victim, Quina, was returning books to the library while on the phone with a friend. She noticed a man sitting on a bench across from the library, staring at her with a menacing look. Quina told her friend that she felt uneasy, and soon after, her friend heard Quina scream on the phone. She immediately called 911 and rushed to the scene. When they arrived, they found a significant amount of blood, and Quina's phone was smashed in two. Quina was urgently taken to the hospital. The attacker was identified as Morris Sparker, just 16 years old. He dragged Quina to the back of the library, where he sexually assaulted and beat her. Quina suffered severe head injuries that resulted in her losing her eyesight and becoming completely paralyzed. In court, Quina's mother broke down in tears, describing her daughter's tragic condition, where she is unable to walk, speak, or even swallow on her own. Ultimately, the court sentenced Morris Sparker to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I hope you die in prison as well. You know, if this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the chair.
After nearly 40 years on the run, Donald Santini was arrested and denied bail. In court, Santini broke down in tears, trying to win sympathy and asking the judge to let him out, but the judge showed him no mercy. At 26, Santini killed Cynthia Wood in 1984, strangling her and dumping her body in a stinky ditch. The police found his fingerprints at the scene, but by then, Santini had already fled and disappeared. He used multiple fake identities to hide from the law, and his escape lasted almost for decades. With advancements in technology, it became increasingly difficult to maintain his false identities until 2023 when police tracked him down in San Diego and brought him back to Florida. After his arrest, Santini insisted he was innocent, and his lawyer requested bail. The judge responded, "Being on the run for nearly 40 years shows he knows he's evading legal consequences. He's the definition of a flight risk." Santini is currently in custody, and if there are any updates on the case, we'll keep you posted. So what do you think about Donald Santini's case? Do you think he'll end up getting released?
You lied! You lied to me!
I'm gonna get another bond. See, I'm gonna get another bond.
A 17-year-old was sentenced for firing 100 rounds at the wrong house, resulting in the death of an innocent woman. The incident took place in West Bexar County, San Antonio, Texas. Gonzalez and a few friends drove up to a house and opened fire, shooting about 100 rounds. Unfortunately, it was the wrong target. The 25-year-old victim, Novita Brazil, was in her bedroom using her computer when she was shot in the face and died almost instantly. Another 41-year-old woman was shot in the leg but survived. Police gathered evidence and arrested Gonzalez, who showed no remorse and even taunted the police while on the run. In court, Gonzalez admitted to his crimes and expressed some guilt when facing the judge, hoping to get parole. The judge ultimately sentenced Gonzalez to 40 years in prison for murder and an additional 20 years for aggravated assault, with both sentences running concurrently. He stated that Gonzalez would be eligible for parole in about 20 years. What do you think about this?
My kids for me and act like that? Fuck you and that fucking bitch.
18-year-old Raymond Frolander stood before the judge with a bruised face, facing charges of sexual assault. A 35-year-old father, Jason, returned home from dining out and heard unusual noises coming from his bedroom. Upon opening the door, he witnessed 18-year-old Raymond Frolander sexually assaulting his young son. In a fit of rage, Jason violently attacked Frolander, leaving him bloodied and unconscious. He went to the kitchen to grab a knife, intending to end Frolander's life. At a critical moment, Jason's son stood in front of him, stopping this action. Jason later stated that he truly wanted to kill that bastard but didn't want to inflict more trauma on his son. Jason then called the police and told them, "I just found a bastard who sexually assaulted my son, and I beat him until he was covered in blood." After receiving medical treatment, Frolander was transferred to jail. He was formally charged with sexual battery. Jason's actions were considered reasonable self-defense at the time of the crime, so he would not face any charges. Following the incident, Jason urged all sexual assault victims to bravely come forward. He hopes that by sharing his experience, he can encourage more victims to seek help. What do you think of his actions? Feel free to leave a comment.
You took my little man from me. I want you to suffer just like I'm suffering right now.
A newlywed wife pushed her husband off a cliff 8 days after their wedding, stating she did not want to have sexual relations with him. "I just pushed him. I didn't think about where we were," Graham said during a police interview. At the wedding, Graham appeared to be filled with happiness. However, shortly after the marriage, she began to feel anguish over her fear of intimacy with her husband. Just 8 days into their marriage, while hiking in Glacier National Park, Graham pushed Johnson off a 200-foot cliff during a heated argument, resulting in his death. After returning home, Graham lost her composure and began lying to friends and family, claiming Johnson had gone out with friends and was missing. A week later, following a police investigation and mounting evidence, Graham eventually confessed the truth to the authorities, and Johnson's body was found at the bottom of the cliff. In court, Graham stated that she only wanted a perfect wedding and did not want a husband. Due to her religious upbringing, she felt terrified of being intimate with Johnson. In the end, she was arrested for second-degree murder, accepted a plea deal, and was sentenced to 30 years in prison, with 5 years of supervised release following her incarceration. What are your thoughts on this matter?
I want to rip you limb from limb and discard you like trash.
A woman was left blind 2 months after her wedding, simply for not giving her husband money for video games. In March 2023, 29-year-old Jennifer married 26-year-old Anthony. Just 2 months later, after Jennifer refused to recharge Anthony's gaming account, he angrily attacked her with his fists and a frying pan. He then choked her with his pajama pants, causing her to lose consciousness. Fortunately, Jennifer's cousin arrived in time to stop Anthony's assault and called for emergency help. Jennifer was taken to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed her with intracranial bleeding that led to optic nerve atrophy, resulting in her blindness. Additionally, she suffered multiple injuries, and now she requires assistance from her parents to walk and cannot feed herself. In court, Anthony admitted to hitting Jennifer with the frying pan 5 times, but denied intent to kill, claiming he did not mean to harm her. He said he only wanted her to give him money for the game. Ultimately, the court found Anthony guilty of intentional homicide and sentenced him to 11 years in prison. Considering the life-altering impact on Jennifer, do you think an 11-year sentence for Anthony is fair? A 24-year-old man has been charged with assaulting an 11-year-old girl and has been sentenced to life in prison. Ramirez Dewberry, 24, was identified as an illegal resident. He lured the girl into an abandoned house while she was waiting for a school bus and subsequently attacked her. After the assault, the girl managed to escape and immediately reported the incident to the police. Authorities found crucial evidence at the scene, including Ramirez's phone and DNA evidence linked to the case. This evidence indicated a direct connection between him and the victim. Ramirez was arrested. Ramirez's family maintains that he is innocent.
They are framing him. He has a child on the way. He is not a bad man.
However, the police have stated that there is sufficient evidence to support the charges. The girl's parents expressed deep sorrow over such a heinous crime and voiced concerns for their daughter's safety and mental health. They hope that the law will impose severe penalties on the offender to protect other children from similar harm. Ultimately, Ramirez Dewberry was sentenced to life in prison. What are your thoughts on children's safety and issues related to homelessness? Do you believe the verdict against Ramirez is fair?